It is my great honor to be here this morning, even though I'm a substitute for Professor Song, who is supposed to present his paper here today. Do you know spare tire? I feel I'm a spare tire replacing flat tire. Anyway, I'm trying to be a good spare tire. I'm going to follow Professor Song's PPT file one by one. His presentation is consisted of 4 parts. First, major characteristics of new leadership in South Korea, North Korea, China, and Japan. Secondly, basic principles for peace and prosperity in East Asia. Third, current issues of this region, including Japanese leaders' political maneuvering or manipulation of history. Finally, immediate agenda for regional cooperation in East Asia. Let me talk about Mr. Song's observation, Professor Song's observation on major characteristics of new leadership in East Asia. Chinese President Xi Jinping is basically a leader of pragmatism. In this regard, he is quite similar to United States President Barack Obama. Next, South Korean President Park Geun-hye is a leader of moderate right, emphasizing trust between political leaders and her or his mass public, trust between South and North Korea, and trust between South Korea and foreign countries. The third one is Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. He is a leader of radical right, spearheading strong Japan. Lastly, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to be rampant and militant. Professor Song Ho-gun is worrying about the fact that the chemistry of these 4 leaders is not harmonious, but appears rather conflictual. Let me move on to the major issues now in East Asia. He believes that East Asian countries must tackle the following 3 challenges for peace and prosperity in this region. First, North Korea's military intimidation, including the country's nuclear threat and conventional military provocations. Second, Japan's radicalization toward ultra-right. Lastly, very limited leverage for China and South Korea to solve the 2 serious challenges I mentioned. Japan and North Korea have persistently put over the past decades. If the current situation does not improve in the near future, he believes that East Asia would face major political crisis sooner or later. Let's move to Professor Song's Korean perspective regarding these issues. He says that South Koreans feel that the country is currently squeezed between North Korean leaders' military intimidation on the one hand and the Japanese leaders' political manipulation of history. Let me show you some examples in South Korean news media Professor Song prepared. Japanese Prime Minister said, definition of invasion is uncertain, which means that Japanese invasion of Korea may not be really invasion. He also said that comfort woman was inevitable for strong truth and hardship. On the other hand, North Korean authorities said that North Korea is ready to wage war if the United States do not stop its anti-North Korean campaign. Professor Song believes that Professor Song is discussing about how do we solve the current problems of East Asia. He said that political leaders of East Asian countries must create a consensus on at least the following three fundamental principles for peace and prosperity in this region. First, do not use or manipulate the history for begging political support at the domestic level. Second, do not reverse the assault and victims of the Japanese colonial period. Lastly, do not distort the history and educate history as it is for the people of East Asian countries. He believed that more than a majority of the people in South Korea, China, and Japan would support these principles, even though he has strong doubt on North Korea on the question of whether the country would respect these principles. Let me move to Professor Song's discussion of how to effectively induce substantial change in North Korea. He said it's not easy, it's not simple. However, we must try to change North Korean government policy, North Korean regime, North Korean people, and North Korean leaders. He said that the basic directions of our policy toward North Korea. We cannot give up the peaceful coexistence of the two Koreas and the denuclearization of North Korea. We must follow the two-track approach. Maximum deterrence on the one hand and multilateral dialogue on the other hand for effectively inducing change in North Korea from the country's military-first policy, 선군 정치 in Korean, to a kind of economic-first policy, 선경 정치. Now let me move to the question of how to deal with Japan's radicalization. He said that we need to find some solution for Japan's radicalization, moving toward ultra-right. He said that we need to get some definite answers to the following questions. For our discussion, he suggested the following three questions. What are the main reasons of the Japanese leaders to strengthen the military forces? Second, is the historical view of Prime Minister Abe Shinzo common to Japanese people? Is Prime Minister Abe's historical view of common sense in Japanese society? Finally, what are the gains and the losses of Japanese people when Japanese leaders say that they are not assault but victims of Japanese colonial period? Let me move to the question of what do we need to do right now for peace and prosperity in East Asia. He suggested the following three potential items we need to do for peace and prosperity in this region. First, economic cooperation by creating a free trade zone in the region in the near future. Second, searching for common tasks for social development, particularly welfare and the labor market. In other words, East Asian countries, South Korea, China, and Japan altogether need to develop a new model of welfare and labor economy for the peace and prosperity of the individual country as well as the region as a whole. I think he is trying to say that we need an alternative to neoliberalism or Washington consensus. Finally, we need to improve collective wisdom for co-prosperity of East Asia. Let me skip this part because it's very hard to understand this figure and the next one. Finally, he suggested his final recommendation for peace and the prosperity of East Asia. We need to activate and upgrade our exchange programs of East Asian countries. He said that there are three fields of exchange programs, including politicians, journalists, and academic scholars of East Asian countries. Let me just add my own recommendations to Professor Song's suggestion of upgrading exchange programs of East Asian countries. I hope an epistemic community of East Asia will be created in the near future, as the European Union have done over the past decades. Epistemic community means transnational intellectual networks which are constituted of politicians, bureaucrats, journalists, academic scholars, and other specialists who are able to identify and share new issues and agendas, as well as collectively find and implement some solutions for the challenges they face for peace and prosperity of East Asia. I hope this forum would be a stepping stone for consolidating epistemic community in East Asia. Thank you.